Do you set goals for practices and games? Do you have a long-term goal that you're working toward as an athlete? In this episode, I'm going to discuss what goal setting is, why it's so important to you as an athlete, some common challenges and mistakes athletes make when it comes to goal setting, and then I'm going to walk you through a framework that you can use to master goal setting in sports. Hey there. I'm Eli Straw, a mental performance coach who works with athletes from around the world on building a stronger mental game. Goal setting in sports involves setting targets that you want to achieve. These can be long-term goals. They can be short-term goals, such as goals you want to achieve by the end of this month, the end of the season, and they can also be daily goals, such as practice goals and game goals. The reason it's so important for you to have these goals set comes from what goals provide us with. Long-term goals provide us with motivation. They give us direction and they help us know what we're working toward. If I have a tough training plan right now and I'm waking up every day and I don't really want to train, but then I remember that long-term goal that I'm working toward. That will help me push through those feelings of not wanting to train. If I have a practice goal set, this gives me direction and focus for that day because I know what I'm wanting to work on. And if I have the correct goals set for games, this gives me clear focus and it will actually help me improve my performance. So there are three key benefits of goal setting for athletes. The first one is that motivation I was mentioning, where we set a goal and it gives us this drive and this push to work hard to achieve that goal. The second one is focus. When you set a long-term goal, this gives you focus and direction, but more on a short-term scale or a smaller scale. When we set correct goals for practices and games, it helps us focus in the moment. And then the third benefit is performance improvement. When you set the correct goals for games, it actually unlocks peak performance instead of holding you back. Now, there are a few different challenges that athletes face or experience when they're setting goals. And the first one is setting goals for games that are too focused on the outcome. Now, when you set a long-term goal, the long-term goal will likely be an outcome goal. And an outcome goal involves a goal that is the result of something you do. Think about winning the game, getting a certain stat line by the end of the season, receiving an award, or winning the championship that year. Those are outcome goals, and those are more of the long-term goals that we'll set for ourselves. But in the short term, when we set outcome goals for games, this can lead to more anxiety and fear. For example, I'm working with a basketball player right now who has historically focused on the score and not making mistakes. For him, he's gone into games setting the goal for himself to get a certain stat line in terms of his points, and then also he set the goal to minimize mistakes. Now, those can seem like good goals on the surface, but for him, they have caused him to play tight and to play out of rhythm because he's so caught up in how many points he does have. And if he gets to the second half and he doesn't have a ton of points yet, he gets in his head. And then early in the game, if he's focused on not making mistakes, this causes him to hesitate and play timidly, so he's holding himself back instead of allowing himself to play freely. So one of the challenges that you might be experiencing with goal setting is focusing too much on outcome goals. Instead of focusing on outcome goals for game, we want to set what are known as process goals, and I'll talk about those a little bit more here in a minute when I go over the goal setting framework. The second main challenge that athletes face when setting goals is setting goals that are too far in the future. So as I said earlier, one of the benefits of goal setting is motivation. When we set a motivating goal for ourselves, this gives us that push and that drive to train on a daily basis. But if my goal is too far in the future to where I can't really see myself reaching it yet. So let's imagine that I'm a freshman in high school and I'm setting the goal to be a starter in college. That's a great goal, and if you do have that goal and it's driving you right now, keep it, right? That's great. But also that's a goal that's 4+ years in the future. So maybe we want to step back and set the goal to be making it onto your varsity team. Or maybe you want to set the goal to be being conference player of the year on your varsity team, right? So we want to set a smaller goal or a shorter time framed goal because that's going to give us more motivation now since we will see ourselves achieve it sooner. Because one of the reasons that we want to set long-term outcome goals for ourselves as athletes is we want to provide ourselves with this sense of urgency in the moment. If my goal is 4+ years into the future, it's a lot easier for me to say, well, I don't really feel like training today. But if my goal is to be a starter this upcoming season and the season is 3 months away, I'm going to reconsider taking that day off because I just don't feel like it, and I'm probably going to push myself through that tough training day. So try not to set goals that are too far in the future. You do want to have an idea of where you're going, right? You want to have that direction, but we want to have the goal that you're using to motivate yourself right now be a goal that's maybe 1 year away, at the most 2 years away. And then the third challenge that you might face is not setting daily goals. So you set that long-term goal. It's about a year or 2 years into the future, maybe even 3 months or so into the future. You feel motivation, right? You feel that drive, that push, but then you don't take the next step to set daily goals for yourself. And daily goals are critical to reaching that long-term goal, because a long-term goal remains nothing but motivation and an idea until we create daily goals that are working to achieve that long-term goal. That's where we really start making progress. So now there's a goal setting framework I want to go over that will help you take the idea of using long-term goals as motivation and combine it with the idea of setting daily goals to help you increase focus and increase performance. So this is going to be about a 4-step process. So the first step is you want to identify that long-term goal. What's the long-term goal that you're working toward right now? Is it one at the end of the season? Is it one that you'll achieve next year, maybe 2 years from now? But let's try not to set a goal that's too far than 2 years into the future. So again, we have that sense of urgency. Now, the next step is you're going to break that down and you're going to set what are known as smaller targets for yourself. These smaller targets can involve, certain stats that you need to achieve. So maybe if you say that you want to be a starter on your team this upcoming season, the season is 6 months away. Maybe you set targets for the velocity that you want to increase if you're a pitcher. So you want to gain 1 mile an hour on your fastball over the course of the next month or so. Or maybe you set this goal to be a strength-based goal, right? These smaller targets are strength-based goals. If you're a football player and you want to be a starter next season, or you want to make it onto varsity next year, maybe you set some smaller targets for yourself that will be about your maxes, right? So what you can do in the weight room. The idea with these smaller targets is to make sure that we are giving ourselves targets and guidelines that we're working toward that we trust will then propel us to reaching that long-term goal. So we have these long-term goals we set for motivation, right? They're going to motivate me. And then I break that down into smaller targets to increase this sense of urgency. I know that I want to reach that long-term goal. I want to be the starter next season. And I know in order to do so, by next month, I need to be here when it comes to my velocity, or I need to be here when it comes to my strength, or I need to make sure that over the course of the next 6 months, I'm doing training every single day or 5 days a week, right? Set those smaller targets for yourself. Then what we're going to do is we're going to break those smaller targets down into process goals for practices and games. And this is my favorite piece of the whole goal setting framework, and probably the main idea that I talk to athletes about within my one-on-one coaching when we are working on goal setting. Which, by the way, if you are interested in my one-on-one coaching program, I've put a link to learn more about that in the description below. Now, process goals are controllable goals we set that are part of the process of our game, whether it's practice or whether it is a performance and it is a game, that we trust will help us reach the outcome we want. So I know I said we want to set a long-term goal for us as an athlete to help improve that motivation. But we're always going to have an outcome goal, because that long-term goal is an outcome goal, but we're always going to have a shorter outcome goal in place for games, because that goal is always to play our best. But we don't want to get caught up in the outcome of the game. We don't want to get caught up in achieving that stat line, winning, having other people think we played well, because again, that can lead to anxiety, fear, expectations, all that sort of stuff. But we want to use that to guide us onto the process of our game. And the process will be what we actually need to focus on, what we need to try to do during that game or during practice to help us play our best. So process goals for practice answer the question, what am I working on today? If you set process goals for practices, this gives you an intention for the practice and a clear focus as to what you're working on that day. And if you do this day in and day out, that's what increases the speed of improvement. If I just practice to practice and I don't exactly know what I'm working on that day, I won't progress as quickly as somebody who has a clear intention for each day. And then process goals for games answer the question, what do I need to focus on that will put me in the position to play my best today? These will be controllable targets that allow you to perform freely, allow you to perform confidently. And if you stick to these process goals for games, we trust that they will help us play our best during that game. And then the last part of this framework is you want to set or you want to create a weekly checklist. This could also be a daily checklist. I do this personally, and I have most of the athletes I work with do this as well. This weekly checklist is going to help us become consistent with working toward our goals, and also consistent during games. So the weekly checklist could involve the amount of training that you want to do. It can involve the exercises you want to do each day to improve your mental game. And then it could also involve a daily checklist you want to do for games or for practices where you say, every practice I want to focus on giving full effort, having positive thinking, listening to coach, setting a process goal, things like that. And then for games, you could have the checklist involve giving full effort for the game, making sure I'm bouncing back from mistakes well, listening to whatever coach says in terms of adjusting during the game, having a positive attitude no matter if we're winning or losing. So these are standards or guidelines that you want to achieve every day and throughout the week. They're very similar to the process goals. I just find it helpful to have this checklist that you can actually go through because, again, it helps you feel like you are making progress toward playing well, and ultimately progress toward your long-term outcome goal. So get started, try to use this framework, and remember that goals are great for motivation if it's a long-term goal, if it's an outcome goal for a game. But at the end of the day, we have to turn any sort of outcome goal that we set into process goals, daily process, controllable goals that we're working on that day, whether it's practice or a game or just the off season, to help us improve and help us ultimately work toward the achievement of our long-term goals. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.